It's February 7th, Friday at 5:30 a.m. Pacific, and this is webinar number 104 for WX Live. And today we have, hi Ben, from South Africa who's attending, but who is giving the talk today is your true blue dude, Uncle Pete. Here you go.
Wow. Man, what an intro. I feel like a rock star or something.
You are.
Morning, everyone. I'm kind of glad to get back to our early morning sessions. I like this much better than the evening sessions. So what we're looking at today is PDF Viewer. The first thing to talk about is, I give you a little background. I've been doing document storage for a very long time. I got involved in one of my very early projects, was all about document storage. So back in the early Clarion days, I had developed document storage solutions and so forth, and it's something that I have incorporated into almost every project I've done since. It's one of those bell and whistle features that sometimes they don't even think they're going to use it, and then they use the heck out of it. And as you're going to see, it's very easy to design your document storage solution where it is basically a drop-in style solution. And we're actually Nick has joined us this morning, and this is the app we're looking at is Nick's app. So if anyone has any questions about the design and look and feel of his app, it's a very nice, powerful application. But anyway, so that's I've been dropping document storage solutions into my projects for going on 25 years now. Back not quite when the documents were stone tablets, but not too far off from there. So when I start talking to a client about document storage, the first decision that we have to make is where we're going to store the documents. And there are basically two answers to that question. Either in a database file, be it a SQL Server, what have you, or as individual physical files out on a network drive somewhere. And each of those solutions have advantages and disadvantages. When you're talking about storing in a database, some of the disadvantages are that database can get very large. I've worked on document storage solutions where we had over 100 terabytes of documents. If you stored that in a database, you're talking about a 100 terabyte database that in a recovery situation, a database is not functional until it's completely restored. So you would be down for the length of time that it would take to restore a 100 terabyte database. Not good. It takes a long time to restore a 100 terabyte database. Ask me how I know. So the key there is that you need to plan and handle that somehow, and just understand that's one of the risks. Now, if you're attaching a few W-9s to vendors and stuff like that, it's not going to make a huge difference. It may not even be an issue, but it's something to keep in mind. If you're going to have millions of documents, storing them in a database is going to make a big database. Another disadvantage is a lot of your functions, and especially if you start trying to deal with third-party tools or anything like that, you're going to have a physical file for that function or tool to access anyway. So what you wind up having to do when somebody's viewing and working with a file is create a temporary file, move the image from the database to that temporary file, and then if they've manipulated it, move it back from the temporary file back to the database. So, there's some extra work that goes on there, and perhaps a bit of a performance hit depending on what you're talking about. So another disadvantage is that the images can't be manipulated outside your software. So to archive off images over a year old, you're going to have to do that from within your software. Those kind of functions, you can't just go out to a DOS directory and zip up a DOS directory and blow it away because it's in a database. So let's look at some of the advantages of storing in a database. Well, you don't need any special network drive access, anything like that. Security is handled by your normal database and application security, which is a big deal, especially if you're dealing with remote users. If you've got users that are not within the location, you're going to have to somehow figure out how to expose a network drive to them to get to those physical files. Now, one of the advantages was also one of the disadvantages. Having them in a database means that your backups are handled by your normal database backup operations. So you don't have to do any extra work, figure out extra solutions for your backups. You're backing up your database. I pray you're backing up your database. Your images are going to get backed up right with your database. So, it's one less thing to think about and manage. And then one of the other advantages is the images cannot be manipulated outside your software. If you remember, we said that was a disadvantage. Well, it's also an advantage because guess what? There are manipulations not done by you that you don't want to happen to your images. So having them in a database definitely gives you a lot more security. And, if you're in an insurance field where you're doing proof of insurance documentation, something like that, the security and proof of those documents becomes a more important thing. Obviously, the security of those documents is more important. So on the flip side, your other solution is to store the documents as actual individual files out on a network drive or something, and then point to those files and use those physical files. Some of the disadvantages to that solution are a large number of files in a single DOS directory can cause performance issues. That number is much higher these days with the newer operating systems, but there is still a number that exists that will start causing you performance issues. Backing up all those individual files can be an issue, especially if they're small to medium-sized files. Backup solutions like tapes and so forth can really fly through big files. They're far less efficient dealing with a bunch of little files because they've got to index those files and so forth. So sometimes that can be an issue. Like I said, any user of your application, because you're storing them on a network drive, the user of that application to be able to view and scan and add documents and so forth, they have to have read-write access to that network drive where those documents are stored, which obviously creates some security issues. And especially that gets even further complicated when you start talking about remote users, is going to really make how you expose that network drive even more complicated. And then, you know, like we've talked about, the images can be manipulated outside your program, and that really becomes complicated and dangerous, because remember, every user of your application has read-write access to that network drive, and those are individual files there. So all it takes is someone that knows a little bit about moving around directory structures and so forth, and deleting physical files and stuff to make for a very bad day for you. So those are things to keep in mind. You know, no solution is right for every project. You know, if you're just storing out documents for, you know, little this and that things, it's not that big of a deal. Now on the other side, there are advantages to the physical files. One of the big ones is in a recovery situation. If you're storing physical files separate from your database and you have a catastrophic event, you can restore your database very quickly, be back up and running, and just not have access to your documents. And it doesn't matter if it takes 3 days to restore those documents. You're restoring them as you restore each individual file, it becomes available again, but you're up and running with your data in your application, which is a far better situation than being down for 3 days while you're waiting to restore the database. So that's some of the advantages. You know, being able to manipulate your programs outside of the of your application is pretty handy at times. You know, one of my very old projects back in the days when disk space was at much more of a premium, we would move off batches of images into a CD jukebox once they reached a certain age. That was very easy to do because we were storing individual files. So there, that's some of the advantages and disadvantages. What we're going to be looking at today is storing them in the database. So that is the solution we're going to use today. So the first thing that I have to do, because I'm storing them in a database, is offset some of those issues. One way that I offset some of those issues is I always create a separate database just for what I call the document store. It has one table in it for the documents. That means that I've got some of that best of both worlds. They're stored in a database, but it's a separate database, so I can restore back up that database separate from my data database, and I don't have that issue of having them married together and having this one giant database that's going to cause recovery issues. So that's one of the ways that I offset some of those issues. So let's take a look at the database design for a second. It's pretty straightforward. Like I said, there's only one table in that database, and that's called the document table. It has a auto-incrementing ID. Every self-respecting table should have an auto-incrementing ID. Document is the actual binary field that stores the actual image. And I was actually looking today trying to find something in the help file that says what the maximum size of this is, and I couldn't find anything. I don't know what the maximum size is. I know I've never ran into a trouble, and I suspect at the very minimum it's something like 2 gig or some crazy field like that. And trust me, if you're storing a 2 gig PDF file, storage size is not going to be your issue. Link table and link ID are, remember, I want a solution that I can drop into every project very quickly and easily. How I do that is I am able to attach documents to anything I need in that project, be it an AP vendor record, be it an AP invoice record, be it a email system, whatever. How I do that is I store the name of the table and the primary key of that table of what this record attaches to. And then you'll see when we get into the application, we use a little indirection and so forth so that we're able to use those fields however we need. Last two fields are just something that I do on almost everything. Ben says it's 4 gig and 18. Thank you, Ben. So yeah, if you're storing a 4 gig PDF file, the opening and viewing of that PDF file is going to take a very, very long time. So that is a limitation that will not be a limitation, a practical limitation of this application by any means. The date added and added by person ID is something I do on most of my tables. You know, it's for audit, i.e. finger pointing purposes. So nothing fancy there. So that's all there is. It's one table. Like I said, that table is in its own database. We do, by doing custom folders, our project code, we can establish a separate database connection just for that document store database so that it is a physical separate database. So that's all there. That's the reason that it's in its own folder in the analysis, is that makes it very easy to establish a separate connection for a separate database. That database could be on a different server, doesn't matter. So it gives us a lot of power to do whatever we need to between our data and our documents. And here is our actual program that we're looking at with our document viewer. We can scan, import documents. We can change the magnification level. Quite a few different, the normal document scanning storage type features. If we had multiple pages here, we would actually see thumbnails of those pages. In fact, I can go open up a different PDF. Well, unfortunately, I got to find one that's multiple pages. There we go. So we have thumbnails of each of those. And I found a bug in this that I need to fix, that I fixed in my demo one, that it doesn't update that image over here immediately. But as you see, we've got thumbnails that we can move through, as well as the image. And as I said, we can change the viewing, fit the screen, whatever we need to. So pretty typical viewer, which, you know, that's the other point to talk about here is, along with storing at the database level or the physical file level, the other thing I do is I basically have two completely different solutions. The solution that we're looking at here today is pure WinDev code. There's no third-party tools, no ActiveX's, no .NET libraries, anything. This is all pure WinDev code, which is very nice. One, we don't have to buy anything extra. Makes installing, supporting all those issues much easier. But it's not as robust as my ActiveX solution is. My ActiveX solution has a ton more power. It also performs much better if you have 100-page documents that you're dealing with, different things like that. So again, it depends on how robust of a project I'm dealing with. If I can get away with this solution, I definitely go with this solution because, anytime that you're dealing with ActiveX's and .NETs or whatever, the support and install of that solution is going to be a nightmare.
Hey, is there a search on this or a find?
No. It's probably something I could add because there is that PDF to text function. Just not anything I've ever worked on or needed.
Yeah, because I did one like you.
It's purely viewing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suspect for your needs, you're going to need a more robust solution. If you need to be able to insert pages in the middle and rotate individual pages and do a lot of those kind of fancy things, the native solution starts becoming an issue. The biggest problem I've seen with it is it does not perform well with larger files. Your high-end ActiveX's and .NET libraries can read page 6 from a PDF off of the physical drive by just reading page 6. The WinDev native functions, I believe, have to read that entire file. That's the way they behave. That seems like what they're doing to me, because once you get into 10, 20 pages, you start seeing some performance issues with the display and so forth. So, again, it all depends on the robustness of the project. And most applications, don't need that level of robustness. So if you all have worked and done the things you should have done, you may recognize this screen. It's one of the WinDev examples, PDF viewer. It's called WD PDF viewer. That's what I started with. Now I've made a lot of changes to it to make it work the way I want it to work. And that's, but I'm a firm believer in not creating anything from scratch. If there's something out there I can borrow and modify. And that's how I started out with this project. Is I started with the PDF viewer example that WinDev gave me, and then started modifying it to meet my needs. So let's take a look at the actual code. And here is our window as you just saw it running in production. We've got a looper over here for the thumbnails, an image control to actually display the page, our toolbar with all of our functions, nothing elaborate by any means. Our procedure takes 3 parameters: document ID, link table, link ID. Document ID is the key to the document record. It's going to be 0 if we're creating a document, or it's going to have an actual ID in there if it's a document that we've already scanned and now we're wanting to view it, edit it, that sort of thing. Link table and link ID are those fields that link it back to whatever in our system. These 4 lines of code here, remember I said when you're dealing with storing your images in a database, often you need to create a physical file for your manipulation within your functions and features and so forth. What I'm doing here is creating a temporary file. I'm using ftemp path, which actually returns the window temporary directory for the user, and ftemp path generates a random unique file name for that temporary directory. That file name is always generated with a TMP extension, and a lot of functions and third-party tools can't deal with a PDF file if the extension is not PDF. So I just rename that extension from TMP to PDF. And then I delete the file if for whatever weird reason that file happened to exist. Remember, we're dealing with the user's Windows temporary directory, and this generates a crazy looking file name. So the chances of that fdelete ever actually deleting a file are pretty slim, just a little bit of belts and suspender coding. Next, like I said, document ID lets us know whether we're dealing with creation or viewing editing. So if the document record already exists, we fetch it out of the database. We actually have to create that file that we just declared, that random temporary file, and write the contents from the binary field in the database to that file, and then close that file. So what we've just done is move that binary memo field into a physical file on the disk. We have created our PDF as a physical file on this user's drive now. And then we set the image control to that file that we've declared up here. If we're creating from scratch, we set the image control to an empty string, and then we call the display image function, which handles the initial viewing, setting up of the screen, and thumbnails. Any questions before we look at display image? All right, moving on. Display image. This, like I said, handles the initial screen setup whenever we load a new image. We start with page 1. We set the total number of pages to the number page property of the image control. That property contains the total number of images. And then we set the static to that, and that static is this static right here, so that we get the page 8 of 12 type display. Then we delete the looper. Anything that's in the thumbnail looper, currently we delete. Then we loop through the number of pages, setting the attributes of the looper. And this is absolutely amazing. All it takes for those thumbnails is what you just saw right there. So let's look at this looper real quick. The looper has an image control. I didn't think there was anything of any fanciness here. And then we have the page number property of that control, and then the actual page number that we display underneath that thumbnail. So all we're doing is saying that we're setting the image control for the thumbnail the same as the image, and then we're setting which page of that image we want to display. So if we come back over here and look, we're looping through here and we're doing, the image control is the same as our big image control, page 1, and then page 2, page 3, and that's all it takes to fill our looper with the individual pages of our PDF. That would be a lot more work in most languages. And what this is doing is we have a group of controls. And if we come over here to the screen and look at groups, we have a group. Let's see, groups. Here we go. Not sure how to see which controls are in that group. Huh. I don't remember exactly how to do that. But some of these toolbar buttons are disabled if we don't have an image being displayed. That's see, like the zoom level is part of that group, so we don't. Oh, I'll bet we can see it if we come over here. No. Okay, there we select. I selected the group, and now you see all the controls that are part of that group. And what I'm doing is, because I've associated all those with a group, I'm able to enable and disable them as a group instead of having to enable and disable each of those individual buttons separately. So basically, all the buttons that don't make sense, if I don't have an image, obviously, I don't need to set the zoom level. I don't need to print it. I don't need to change the page number. So I just disable all those controls with this statement if we don't have an image. And then we also call a function that sets the zoom. And all we're doing is we pass in, if this function has an optional parameter by having the equal sign. We have an optional parameter. So if you noticed where we called this, we're not passing in the parameter. So now nZoom is going to equal -1. nZoom equals -1. Then we set the zoom to whatever the zoom level of the PDF currently is. What that's all about is we're going to see other places in our code when we hit the zoom buttons that we're going to pass in the zoom level that we want to use. But in this instance, we're not changing the zoom. We just want to get the initial setup. So what that's doing is finding out what is the zoom level of the PDF, really the zoom property of the image control. And then we're simply selecting that value from the combo box. So we're simply finding out what level this PDF needed to be displayed in here, and then setting this. And if we run the application again, this will take a little while to run because we're connecting to a database in the UK. See, if we've got the level of 19, even though that's not one of our standard zoom values, it is what the current zoom level of this document is. So that code that we just looked at set that zoom level to 19. So that's all there is to that, and we'll see more about that zoom level as we move through the rest of the code. So at this point, we have opened the file, set up the looper, and set all of our initial controls, our page numbers and everything, and viewed the document. So the work of the initial load is now completed. One thing I wanted to show you, if I can find it real quick here, is on this image. Yeah. By these settings here on the image, control the fact that by default it starts out as fit to page. So that's the reason it started out at zoom level 19, is because this image control is set to be homothetically centered, meaning center it up and make it fit the page. So that's the reason we started out at 19. We didn't have to do anything special in our code to make that happen. So any questions before we dive into the code of each of the individual buttons? Okay. Moving right along.
I don't see any.
Man, moving right along.
Yeah, you're just too clear.
Put everybody to sleep quickly this morning.
Well, Wolfgang might break the trend here. No, maybe not. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So next, let's look at some of these simple buttons, and then we'll circle back to the more complex stuff. We'll skip scanning, importing, copying, and printing for now. Let's look at the zooms first. Let's look at that code since we more or less saw some of that code already. So let's start with our combo box. Remember, it had some set values in it. 25, 50, 100, 125, 150 are some of the set values. And if we look at the code of that combo box, all we do is when we select a row of that combo box, we set the variable inZoom to the value of the combo box, and then we set the PDF, the image control zoom property to that value. The reason we're doing this is this property complained, if I remember correctly, because remember, your controls are always strings. No matter what you're doing with them, they're really strings. So sometimes you'll get a complaint and you'll have to get a value into a true numeric field, and apparently I ran into that on this one. I don't remember that 100%, but that's usually when I'm doing this type of coding, is I've ran into one of those kind of complaints. So really, all we're doing is setting the zoom factor, the zoom property of the image control, to 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150. And it changes the zoom to that level. Really that simple. No calculating, no image manipulation. We just changed the property of this image control to 25%, and now we're zoomed at 25%. That simple. Again, WinDev does make life easy. Yeah. Any of you that used my imaging templates back on Clarion know that it wasn't that easy for me to zoom images in Clarion. All right, so now these three buttons are, your typical fit to height, fit to width, fit to screen. So let's look at fit to height. We literally, along with zoom percentages, the zoom property accepts a couple of constants. Zoom, adapt to hide. Does exactly what it says it's going to do when we, and remember, we're calling that same combo, that same assigned zoom combo box property that we had before, which all that does is change the combo and the zoom property. So by setting it to assign a zoom adapt to hide, that makes it, it sets the zoom level to whatever it needs to set it to so that the entire image will fit in height. It can go off on width, but it's going to fit in height. And then we call that assign zoom combo box procedure to get our combo box set again. So let's see that. If we do 100%, obviously we're not fitting to height now. Then we click view full height. It adapted it to height, and then it called that procedure. And now the zoom property, you remember we set the zoom property to that constant, but when we read it back in that procedure, it told us 19, because that's what that constant actually did, was it figured out that it needed to set it to 19 so that it would fit. We didn't have to do that calculation. It did it for us. I bet you can almost guess what code is going to be behind the width. Zoom adapt width. Other than that, that code's identical. And as you see, by adapting the width, it actually doesn't fit in height. But it did shrink it so that the width fit. And that's a factor of 29%. So again, all we did was set the constant and then go call our procedure that reads it and set our combo box to that value. And then the final one is fit to adapt to size, which makes it fit the entire width and height. And that's right there. So that's all the zoom logic. No more to it than that. All right, next is our pages. We've got go to the first page, go back one page, jump to any page, go forward one page, go to the last page. So let's look at those in action. We got a 2-page document here. Obviously, previous page isn't going to get us anywhere if we're on page 1. But if we're on page 2, it changed to page 2. Notice that the thumbnail is actually being selected as well. So, along with our document page changing, our thumbnail row gets selected appropriately as well. And we can actually type in page 2 there to jump to page 2, which is really handy if we've got 50 or 100 pages. So if we look at the code for those, oops. Again, we're going to see that it's very simple code. All we do is set the property. There's a page number property of our image control, and we literally set it to the page number that we're looking at this. So whatever page we type in, we set it to that page number, and then we're using the looper select plus to select that row of the looper. Because remember, we have page number as one of the attributes of the looper, so it's very easy to, all we have to do is select the second row of that looper, and we know that's page 2. So those 2 lines of code is what handled us changing that page number and jumping to selecting that second page of the looper. Then if we look at our previous page, nothing fancy here. We just make sure that we have an incremented past page 1. If we haven't, we decrease the page by 1. And then this same 2 lines of code that we already looked at, we set the property, reselect the looper, and we're off to the races. As you would imagine, this code just sets it to page 1. The next page code does the exact same thing, except it increments it. And here we're making sure we're not past the total number of pages. And then the final page, as you imagine, jumps to whatever the final page is. So that's all of our page navigation. Again, nothing elaborate whatsoever. A few properties of the image control make life pretty dang easy for us. So really the only real work we have is in our printing, scanning, copying, importing, and our setups. So let's look at a couple of those setup things first. One is we have this checkbox here that if we look, there's no code behind it. It's just simply a checkbox that says show scanner setup. What that is for is when we scan, whether we want to call the scanner setup. Very similar to when you're doing reports. When you print a report, do you want the printer setup dialog to come up or not? Same thing, do you want the scanner dialog to come up as part of the scan or not? So that's what that checkbox is for, and we'll see that code when we look at the scanning code. And then we have select scanner. We're going to use the Twain functions of WinDev to do our scanning functions. And one of the things that you have to do is select your Twain source. If you've got more than one scanner, you know, in fact, if we look at this, if I click here, you see I have multiple Twain scanners on my system. I have to select which one of those scanners I'm working with so that the software knows which scanner to talk to. So that's what the code behind this button is doing, is popping up that scanner select. That's probably a bunch of code, right? Well, you know, it's one line of code. Twain select source. So all there is to it. You know, they've given us all the Twain functions. So all we have to do is say we want to select this Twain source, just like the printer setup dialog. It's one function call to call that screen. So these are our 2 setup functions. We're going to look at scan and printing last. So let's take a quick look at import. So import is simply, in fact, you saw me use it earlier when I changed that document. It changes, it imports an existing PDF into our document system. So we call the standard WinDev dialog to let them select a PDF from somewhere on their drive. Then we simply copy that file to, and this is the bug that needs to be fixed right here. We copy whatever file they selected, we copy that over the top of the file we've been dealing with. If you noticed earlier when I imported a file, my thumbnails changed, but my main image didn't change. It's because that image control, the file name never changed, so it didn't sense that it needed to refresh. So by setting that image control to blank and then resetting it to the name of the file, it senses that it needs to reload that file from the drive and refresh itself. So all we did was copy that file, whatever file they selected, to our file name that we defined at the very beginning of the procedure, clear the image control, reset the image control to our file name, and then call our display image procedure that does that initial setup of the screen that we've already seen that code. All there is to an import. Now this is where we get into robustness, and some of this I could add some additional features and work out being able to insert an image into the middle, importing PDFs and PNGs and things like that. Some of that I could handle with the native functions, but because I also have the far more robust ActiveX solution, anytime I get into needing those elaborate functions, I'm more than likely are going to need other elaborate functions. So I've never done the work to this solution to make it handle those types of things. So in its current state, it strictly deals with PDF files, which has become the standard of document storage. It used to be TIFF, now it's PDF. So supporting PDFs and simply being able to import them and scan them handles 80% of the needs out there. And when I get into more elaborate ones, I move into my ActiveX solution. So there's the import. Copy is really very simple. It's almost backwards of what we just did. Again, we use the standard WinDev functions to prompt the user for, we're calling the standard file save dialog. It's what we're doing here. So we're asking them where do they want to save a copy off to, and then because all we have to do is do an fcopy file to copy that image control to whatever file they told us. So they say where they want to save it, and then we use the fcopy to make a copy of it. So now we can, what that feature is right here. I've got somebody wanting me to email them a copy. Well, the lazy programmer didn't give me an email button right in here, so I do save it to wherever I want, and now I can go into Outlook and attach it as an attachment. So that's all the code there is to that. So we have now seen the code behind everything in here. Oh, one last bit. We do have a little bit of code behind the looper. When you select a row of the looper, we changed, it's the exact same code. Remember, if you type in page 2 here, it changes the property to page 2. Exact same thing here. If you click on a row of the looper, all we do is change the image control page number property to whatever page number of that looper that you just clicked on, and then we set the page number here to that same value so that it properly reflects what page you're on. So that's the only code that's in the being able to use the looper to navigate through the pages. So not a lot of code yet, right? I mean, we probably have looked at less than 50 lines of code, and we're down to every bit of functionality is covered except for scanning and printing. So let's look at scanning first. Now we're getting into, we've got 41 lines of code here, and let me tell you, 41 lines of code in WinDev is a lot of code. It used to be, that was nothing, but these days, anytime I got 40 lines of code, I'm thinking, man, I worked for a living today. So let's take a look at what this code does. Again, we're using the standard WinDev functionalities to accomplish all this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the standard WinDev Twain functions to do the scanning. We set up a couple of variables. We're going to find out how many pages they scanned, and we're going to use a temp file. In this instance, the way the Twain function works is if they scan 10 pages, it's going to actually create 10 files because we're doing a little loop here, and we'll see that in a minute. So I actually name those scan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm doing here is, again, I'm working with the user's temp directory, and I'm just making sure that there's no scan anything BMP files already in that temp directory. So, I'm just deleting them up, getting them out of there. So then we have this little loop set up here. So that, what happens with the Twain functions is they make a call out to the Twain scanner software, and until they return a Twain state of TS unloaded, it means they're scanning another page. So this grabs a page, and then once this function returns a false, or we get this Twain state, if either of those two conditions take place, we drop out of this loop. So all this loop is doing is working with the Twain software to get those documents. And all we're doing is we're using the Twain to BMP WinDev function. We're saying scan total pages. We're incrementing that. We started out at 1, so it's going to call this first page scan1.bmp. Remember that checkbox on the screen? That's one of the parameters of this Twain to BMP function. Let's take a look at it in the help file real quick. Whether or not to display the user interface. So that's exactly why all we got to do is pass that checkbox as that parameter. Do we want the scanner interface to pop up or not? I'm doing black and white because I'm doing document storage. I don't want to, I'm not scanning images, photographs. I want black and white that makes the documents most readable, smallest size, those sort of things. The type, the number of bits, we're doing 1 bit black and white, not even doing grayscale. Black and white is what we're doing because, again, for true documents, that works the best. Doing 300 DPI. And then we've got contrast and brightness and duplex mode that we could play with as well. And I'm just setting those to zeros and falses. So once this loop has completed, I will have, if I had an ADF feeder on my scanner and I stuck 10 pages on it and clicked the scan button, it just sucked in those 10 pages and created scan1.bmp, scan2.bmp, scan3.bmp on down the line. So why did I do Twain to BMP? Well, because they haven't given me a Twain to PDF. I really wish they would, because if they'd give me Twain to PDF, we would now be done. But unfortunately, we don't have that. We only have, let me look real quick here. We have GIF, JPEG, clipboard, and scan zone, which I don't understand at all. So we can only scan the GIFs, JPEGs, BMPs. We could scan directly to an image control, but that it doesn't work in our instance because that would only be one page. You know, if we scan 10 pages, we'd only get the last page. So what has worked the best for me is just to scan to BMP. That seems to be the best quality of scans. So I'm scanning to BMP. And now once I've got those 10 individual BMP files, this entire code here is all about turning those BMP files into a PDF file. How am I going to do that? Well, guess what? WinDev gives me the ability to very easily print the PDF. So all I'm going to do is print the images to PDF, and I have now converted my BMP files into a multi-page PDF. So we look, first thing we do, we turn the hourglass on. We decrease the total pages by 1 because the way this logic is working, we're going to get 1 more page than what we're actually really scan. We set the image control to an empty string. In other words, we remove the image out of the image control, and we delete the file that we created. Again, I'm not giving them the ability to scan to the end of the file or anything. So in this instance, when we scan, we're completely replacing whatever document was there. It goes back to, this is my simple solution, not my robust solution. We could have some extra logic here that lets these scans tack on to the end and all kinds of craziness like that, but we'd get into having to do PDF merges and different functionality that is so much easier to do in my more robust ActiveX solution. So all I'm doing is completely deleting our image file. Now we're getting into the actual print functions here. I'm setting the default printer and paper size to letter. Now you should recognize this code. It's the exact same code that we used up above. All I'm doing now is creating a second temporary file. So that's what I've done there, and I'm making sure that that file doesn't exist. And then I'm setting the destination of my print to the PDF file that I just defined. And now here's my loop. All I'm going to do is loop from 1 to the total number of pages I scanned. And then I do print image, making it fit to page width and height. Alphabetically displayed simply says, remember I defined my PDF as being, or my destination rather, as being letter size. So that says fit this image on a letter size piece. Print that image. If we've still got more pages to do, we skip the page and loop back up again. So that makes sure that every image goes onto a separate page. And then once we've reached our total number of pages, we do in printing, which completes the printing process. And now we've turned those BMP files into a PDF file with that little bit of code right there. So one of the things to take out of this is, you notice I didn't call a report or anything. This is all being done You can do print functions without a report, which is exactly what I've done here. I've generated a report, printed it to PDF, and now I simply set that PDF, our image control, to our file and display it, and we're off to the races back into our normal code. And finally, we turn off the hourglass. So now we've scanned the image, taken all those individual BMP files from the scanning process, printed those into a PDF document, changed our new image control to that PDF document, and then gotten back into our standard display. We're up and running back into our normal code where we can move from page to page to whatever we want to do. Any questions? All right, last piece. Let's look at actual printing of a document. Very similar to the code that we just did. All right, I'll wait here. Ben's typing something. I don't want to dive into this code until we see. Okay, Ben has a question once I finish. Ben doesn't want to share with the class. No problem. We'll jump through this printing code because it's very similar to the code that we just saw. All we do is I configure is the printer dialog. So we're calling up the printer dialog, find out where they want to print this image. And because I need to do some special things here, I actually have a second image control that you haven't seen yet. There's actually two here laying on top of each other. And the difference is this one, remember the first one was set, that's image PDF. Image PDF one. Okay, I'd have to review my logic, but there was a reason I had to do two different image controls to get this to work. And it has to do with that zoom level. I'll have to, when I get the article done, that'll definitely be in the blog article that'll be posted over the weekend. But what I'm doing is I'm moving from my one image control into my second hidden image control. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can get some, okay, that's why. The reason I'm doing it is because I'm going to be manipulating that image control to set the width and height. If you notice, I'm having to zoom to 25% to show it on the screen. So what I'm doing is I'm actually using the bitmap info. This is another WinDev function to get some information about an image file, and that includes PDFs. And I'm finding out what is the width and height of that file. And I'm using that information to set this image control to that width and height. That hidden image control is now the width and height of the file, so that when I do the iPrint image with fit to page, it goes to, it starts out at its highest quality and shrinks it down. If I didn't do this little bit of logic in here, what would happen is, because my image control is displayed already shrunken down, I would lose quality. So what I'm doing is I'm using a hidden image control, making it the full width of the PDF as it is on the disk, so that then when I drop into my printing loop, it starts out as its maximum resolution and then shrinks down. No, if you did zoom to 100, you would only see the bits and pieces that are actually in the image control. It's because we're saving the image control to a JPEG right here to because we can't print the image control. We're having to print a physical file, so we're saving what is in the image control to a file and then printing that file. So if I did zoom 100 and then did save image, I would only get the bits and pieces of the image that fit in the image control. So, I'm using a hidden image control, making it full size. The thing's giant. We just never see it because it's invisible. And then I'm saving that JPEG file off, and then I'm doing a print image, making it fit to the page width and height. And then that same logic that we looked at earlier, skip page so that I only get one image on a page. And then once I've done all the pages, I end the printing. And then this little bit of housekeeping code deletes those JPEG images I just created and sets that hidden image control back to an empty string so that we're not locking up, holding that image in an extra image control in the background. And that little bit of code there handles printing of a multi-page PDF very quickly and easily. I've done this a bunch of different ways. I've got with my more robust solution, because I'm dealing with TIFF files, I had to do it a little separately, and there I'm using nested reports and image controls on reports to handle the printing. But with PDF files, it's very easy for me to handle it right here without having to have an extra report. The nice thing about that is, remember, I want a solution that is very easy to drop in a project. It's one screen, very easily to drop in. Yeah, I'm waiting to see what they've done with the multi-page TIFF support, because that is definitely something I'm interested in. But I suspect it'll be similar to PDFs. It's supported, but performance is not great if you get above 10, 15, 20 pages, which is the exact same issue I have with PDFs. And my more robust solution is being used at the bank, where they scan 300-page phone bills. And when we did that with the native functions, it just was horrendous performance-wise, where the ActiveX displays that and moves from page to page very quickly. So that is all the code of our image viewer. It's a simple drop-in solution. Like you saw, all we got to do is pass 3 parameters: the name of the table. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one bit of code that I didn't show you. When we close the screen, we need to create the document record. And remember again, I said if we passed in a document ID of 0, we know we're adding. So again, all we do, document is the binary field. We simply make that our image control. That moves that image into the binary field. Link table and link ID were the passed in fields, so that we attach this to whatever. Date added by, straightforward. We add the document, or if there was already a document ID, then we simply move whatever we've done with the image back into the document and do a modify. And then finally we do a cleanup of the temporary file that we created to start this whole process. And then I also return the document ID. So the reason I'm doing that is, depending on how I implement this solution, I may store the document ID on the record on the other side. So instead of having to go find the document that is AP invoice ID 32, I may add document ID to the AP invoice header file. So now when I pull up that AP invoice, I already have the document ID, and I can just call that document ID, pass it into this function. So when I add a document, I want to get that document ID back out to the other side in case I'm wanting to use that to save it. What determines page setup, A4 or letter? I wonder why Nick's asking me that, because he just realized I have letter page set up in his UK project. As we've discussed before, Nick, you guys just do certain things wrong over there, like the spelling of center and using A4 paper size. What we're going to have to do, and we just haven't kind of gotten there, there is a couple of parameters in here. Right here, I paper size letter. That parameter right there will need to be in the default manager system configuration and be able to be set from letter or A4. Good point and catch there. Either that, or we just change all of Europe to change to letter size paper. While we're at it, why don't we get them to get off that goofy metric system?
And drive on the right side of the street.
Yeah. I mean, they're insane. You know, there's nothing else you can say about it.
It's opposite. That's all.
It's the only people I've ever met that spell worse than I do. I mean, I can at least spell center and color.
And behavior.
No, I can't spell behavior. That's
so any other questions for the Uncle Pete?
Yeah, we can open up the mics. We're done with the demonstration. You need to give Benny's mic back.
Oh, what'd he do? Disappear on me?
Yeah.
Hey, Ben. Chat on.
Yeah, Ben, I showed the scanning part right before you jumped back in. It's this little function here. I'm using the Twain to BMP, and then I get all the individual pages as BMPs, and then I just loop through and use the print to PDF functions to turn those BMPs into a single PDF file.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, wow, that volume's high. Okay. Yes, I was wondering about that, Pete. There's a lot of that code that you can get out of there if you really want to. I do a Twain to control, which is an image control. And then I copy the image into a buffer and I save the buffer to a PDF file. That's 3 or 4 lines of code.
Gotcha. So you loop through, clear the control, save the control, because you have to be doing something for multiple pages.
It depends. The Twain to control seems to handle multiple. I've got a document feeder scanner here and a single page scanner, and it seems to handle both of them quite well. Okay, we're
Oh,
talking
okay.
about
So
documents
so
that's
we
3 or
actually
4
get all the
pages.
pages into the image control.
It seems to be, yeah, I do the Twain to
Okay.
control, the control name, comma false, comma Twain black and white, because I need black and white images.
Right.
And
Right.
then
Same thing I'm doing.
I dump the image control into a buffer and do a F save buffer with .pdf extension, and that's it.
Very, very, very cool.
You have a look at that, and then you see if it works for you, because it will be interesting to see. Because you're obviously doing yours for a specific reason like this. Otherwise, you would have done that same one. Now, we are using very small images or small documents, 3-page, 4-page documents, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah, I
I
actually
expect it
think,
to go higher later.
you know, I think I actually, you know, some of this comes from, you know, stuff I was doing in 15 and so forth, and I played with all the different ones, and it may have been because I thought that the Twain to control didn't handle multiple pages or something is the reason I didn't use that one. And maybe it didn't used
Okay,
to, and now it
interesting.
does. I'm not sure. Yeah, and the other thing that I played with was quality, and you know, I tried Twain to GIF, Twain to BMP, and Twain to BMP seemed to be the best quality, but I suspect that Twain to control would be even better than that. So I definitely will play with that because that will simplify. You know, you remember I told you guys, you know, 40 lines of code sure was a lot of WinDev code. Ben may have just given me the ability to shrink this procedure down to 10 lines, and this entire viewer scanner is probably less than 50, 75 lines of code at that point.
Yeah, because Pete, the other thing why I'm doing that is we create what we call a template on top of a document, and especially with single page documents, that's very nice. Is if you identify the document, then it loads that template, and you can do zone scanning. Then you use Twain scan zone, and you only scan those areas of the document in that you want and not the whole document. And that's very nice, pushing it through to an OCR or something to that effect, you know.
Gotcha.
Any case, so my question was just I wanted to view this code again on the scanning and then just ask you or tell you that there's a Twain to control which I use, which cuts out a lot of code, but it might behave differently from yours.
Yeah, I definitely will play with that because that would simplify. And I obviously don't like anytime, you know, you're having to move from BMP to PDF. You're you know, every time you touch and manipulate an image, you're taking a risk on damaging the quality of that image. So
Yes, yes.
maybe
And
going
Twain to
straight to
control
control
has
will
got
be
a
better.
lot of things. Yeah, Twain to control has got a lot of things that you can do with it. Here it says, if the scanner includes a loader and if it supports multi-pages, you have the ability to perform a scan of all the pages in a row. If you scroll down a bit, down right to the bottom, there we go. Multi-page scanner with loader.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I'll definitely will play with that. Like I
Okay,
said,
thanks
I
man.
don't know.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, not sure when they added that, or maybe it wasn't available back when I was doing it. I'm not sure, or may just not have seen it back in those days. To answer your question, Chris, everything that I've shown you today is dealing with PDFs. TIFFs are not very well managed natively by WinDev, although it sounds like 19 they're getting a little better at them, which is kind of shocking because TIFF is kind of very quickly going the way of the dinosaur. TIFF used to be the go-to format for document storage, and PDF has won that battle, and most of even your high-end document storage solutions nowadays are using PDF as their back-end engine instead of TIFF. You were shockingly quiet today, Arnold. No questions from you?
Well, no, you've been so clear. I mean, everybody seems to have it figured out. I mean, you like Chris says, he says you make it too easy.
Yeah. Now, I expect to never see a WinDev project that doesn't have document scanning storage capability incorporated now.
Ever. So what makes the whole thing so easy is that the image is a PDF. That's the way of the world now, right?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, the image control handles multi-page PDFs. That's you know, at least with 18, that's the only thing that it handles. And like I said, there are some performance issues. You know, don't get too excited. You throw a 100-page PDF at that image control, and the performance absolutely sucks. So, you know, again, this is not a robust solution. It's the 80% solution. But, you know, most of my applications, that's all they want is to be able to, you know, scan backup documentation, you know, invoice approvals, those sort of things. And in those situations, the solution is very easy. It's all native, nothing to buy.
Okay. Nothing to buy. That's the best part.
Hey, I like it.
Okay. If there's no other, oh, maybe we got more comments.
Oh, all right. There is 20 to PDF in 19. Hot dog.
That was worth the wait.
Yeah, no kidding. You do remember me mentioning earlier in the webinar that I wish they would come out with 20 to PDF.
Your wish is granted.
Yeah. These guys
Yes,
just
I
make
was
life
actually
easy.
just searching to make sure it's there before I told you.
Now the next question is, does it fully work in this release, or do we have to wait till 20 before it's fully grown?
Yeah, you see the problem which they do. Yeah, the problem which they do is they say a PDF can be fitted into an image control, and like you said, they load the whole PDF document. They don't
Right.
just load a page, and that's where the problem lies.
Yeah. That's I talked about it in the webinar at the point that you had jumped out, that my more robust ActiveX solution and most of your high-end ActiveXs and .NET libraries can actually read a single page out of a physical PDF document, where it seems like the WinDev functions have to read the entire document, and that's the reason. And it seems to be somewhere between the 10 and 20 page mark is where the performance starts becoming questionable. You know, as long as you're staying under 10 pages, it doesn't seem to be enough of an issue to need the more robust solutions.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, again, 80% of your projects probably don't need it. So, you know, and if you can stay away from ActiveX's and .NETs, you know, it makes life so much easier when you come to support and installs and upgrades and all those kind of issues, not to mention licensing and all those issues. So, yeah, I definitely try to stay with the native solution as much as possible. Anything else, or we done? Ben, you want to give us a couple minutes on your upcoming conference?
Good idea.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. We had our first South African Developer Conference last year, and we had about 23 people attend, and we had a lot of people that said they couldn't attend because of the airports being very far away and them having to rent vehicles to get to where we were and so on. So this time we moved the conference to a place called Mossel Bay, which is close to the George Airport. We've got a whole week there where we are going to discuss and go in details through every part of the IDE and the development environment which most people don't use, haven't got yet. Like the whole design part of the environment, as well as the support part of the environment after the fact. So we're going to do the whole design environment. We're going to take a project and design it from scratch, create all the flow charts and the state charts and all the classes and everything that's got to do with it. But the first day, for the first half of the first day, we're going to have Jerome from PCSoft. He's coming through from France, and he's going to come and do two things for us. He's going to open the conference for us, and he's also going to demo the beta version of the English WinDev 19. So that the guys on the conference is going to be the first guys that's going to see the English version of WinDev 19 or WebDev, of the whole 19 environment. And what we want to do with the first day is actually get non-users to come in and come have a look at the whole environment and see how it might fit them, as we've got a lot of Delphi and Visual Studio guys that's come over to WinDev in the last few months. So that's it in a nutshell. If anybody's interested, you can go to www.windevsa.co.za. Let me type it for you, www.windevsa.co.za/workshop, and that would take you to the pages for the conference and so on.
And what are the dates?
I invite. The dates are from the 7th till the 11th of April. And if you guys go and check your Rand dollar and your Euro dollar exchange rates, it might actually be worth your while to come and attend, because it's going to cost you about half of what it would have a few weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah, I know I looked last year in the air rates because the situation with the dollar back then, the air rates were were what just made it extraordinary. So, but that does change on a weekly basis, no doubt.
Yeah, now in the worldwide currency markets, the rand is one of the two currencies that's in free fall at this point in time. So yeah, go and look at your currency exchange rates. It might actually be worth your while. Okay, so that's all I've got to say on that. Oh, and obviously there will be goodies without the girls.
Goodies.
Goodies like pens and caps and T-shirts and swag. Yeah, we call it goodies.
But not the PC Soft swimsuit team.
Well, Jerome's going to be there, so that's going to be. Did you let people know that?
Yeah, he said Jerome was going to be there the first day.
Yeah, Jerome's going to be there the first day, yes.
That's great.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty. So if there's no other questions, let's call it a wrap, and we'll meet again.
But before you wrap up, Arnold, Arnold and I were talking this morning before we got started with the conference, and I'm probably going to go to a twice a month format for Uncle Pete's Corner, so that one, I've got so many projects going on. Yeah, exactly. I've got so many projects going on that every week is starting to become tough on me some weeks, and also we'd like to encourage lots of other folks to do webinars as well. So we're probably going to go to every 2 weeks Uncle Pete's Corner,
or twice a month, like the first and third or something like that, or every other week or something, right?
Right.
Whatever's easiest for you to figure out, or whenever you feel like coming.
Wolfgang, get your material ready, buddy.
Yes.
Yeah, we're ready to hear from you.
We'll get ready.
Okie doke. So we'll see you guys next time. Probably there won't be one next week, but maybe we will. See who signs up. Thanks. And we'll talk to you guys later. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
again,
Arnold.
Uncle Pete.
You too.
Good session. Bye.
Thanks, guys.